Hello everyone, this is Amit Goswami and this is segment number 6 in our series Quantum Worldview and Indian Spirituality. We have talked about the two selves, the quantum self, the Tangled hierarchical self, and then we have talked about how memory is an essential part of the Tangled hierarchy. So in order to manifest the Tangled hierarchy, we really need memory, and that means that the quantum self will have to degenerate into a much more personal, memory-oriented self, and that self is what we call the ego. But in that process, there is another process that the brain acts. Brain capacity has this capacity, which is good, sounds very good initially, because how is memory reinforced? Memory is reinforced by recalling it. As we recall, our facility of retrieving the memory increases, so it's a useful process for memory making that can be retrieved, which is of course the only memory that is useful to us, that which we can retrieve. But in the process, the brain allows a reconstruction of the memory. This is called reconstructive memory. And this reconstructive memory means that we can develop a personality that suits us in different situations. Now look at the situation. We are already having these memories that will shape our experiences in the following form. We know that memories produce conditioning, a conditioned pattern of habits, a part of ourselves that represent the habits, and also the habits have a good part too. Some things we learn creatively, we learn with a quantum leap, and those parts become part that automatically comes into play when we behave in the appropriate way to a suitable stimulus. That part of ourselves we call character. When a habit pattern gets automatic in terms of our recalling ability, it becomes character. That's good. But this reconstructive memory produces a snag in the character, because this reconstructive ability makes us into a being that can use different situations for dealing with stimuli differently. I'll give you an example. You are with your parents, and there is certain expectations that parents have about you. So what do? You hide that part of your life that the parents don't approve. And you exemplify those parts of your life to give the parents a make-believe idea about you that they want to hold on to. That is not the real you anymore. But still, it facilitates your relationship with your parent. So that's your parent persona. You wear a mask to become the good boy that the parents want you to be, or the good girl that the parents still see you as. Whatever their definition of good that you interpret to be their definition is a better way of putting it, but still it's pretty accurate. You know the kind of thing they don't approve, and you don't want to show them that aspect of yours is that's what you have become. So all of us, and because the brain cooperates in this, all of us develop this capacity of representing ourselves differently in different situations, and where different masks to represent us differently, like actors do when they play. We also play act. We present ourselves as really in a masquerade. We masquerade as another person in different situations. This gives us this persona. Not only personality, that's the consistent personality all the time. Personality is not a bad term, but persona, that we vary from one situation to another. One people have more than one persona. And this is not a disorder. Personality disorder is uncontrollably falling into one of those personalities that you don't necessarily like, or that is not necessarily something that you approve. Then it becomes a disorder. But everybody has various personalities that they use in different situations. That's a natural part of you. And then what follows that you must have a central processing place where from you choose the persona you want to use in a particular situation. You have become the head honcho of a bunch of programs that you run. Do you see that you have become the head of a simple hierarchy of programs? We all become like that. So ego is not only a bunch of pattern of habits, a bunch of conditioning, and part of which forms our character, which is a commendable thing. To have something that we can count on. Like I am a physicist, I'm a philosopher, I can count on that behavior. I look at a problem automatically. I look at deeply into it. I'm not satisfied with the superficial understanding of any situation that I think important. I look deep. That deep looking makes us a special person. So only some people have it. The philosophers, the scientists. You may have the character of being an artist, or a singer, or a dancer, or an architect. These are character aspects. So you become professionals because you emphasize a particular aspect of the character. But persona is entirely different. Character is something that is a conditioning that you use. You can use it at the service of the archetypes, or you can use it at the service of the ego. That's your choice. But the character per se is flexible. It's just something that you have learned. It's a quality that you have earned. It's something that comes into play that can play either way. But persona is different. It's you who run the persona. You have become the head honcho of a hierarchy. So instead of responding to the simple hierarchical quantum self and using your character for the service of the quantum self, which would be a good thing, now you can use the character in the service of this head honcho, the persona, the me. And this is what produces ultimately a competition for the quantum self. And when the mystics talk about this ego persona is not a good thing, it is this combination, it is this simple hierarchy that the mystic is telling you to be cautious of, creating a lot of confusion because they often will say kill the ego. I don't think that mean to kill the good part of the ego, which is the character. They mean to kill this head honcho of the persona programs. Because when you become the head honcho of a persona program, you don't want to acknowledge the quantum self, which is a tangled hierarchical self, which is beyond this persona, which would be a good thing for us to acknowledge. So the spiritual journey is some ways to give up this persona, not the ego character, but unfortunately, the misconception is created in the public mind that it is giving up the ego. Please understand that we need the ego character. Why do we need the ego character? Quantum self, that experience, the creative experience, is one of the quantum self. We have said that spontaneous quantum leaping to a new meaning of an architect. That comes spontaneously to us, that creative insight. Quantum leap happens only at the quantum self. That is just an intuition, it's just an insight from the quantum self. Now somebody has to hear it and give language to that insight. The language is a program in the brain. And to proficiently use the language is a property that the ego has learned, which is called the character. For example, people who can give language to prose, they are called writers, authors. Or poetry, they are called poets if they do that. Or art, then they are called artists. And those things are elements of character, without which we cannot really be creative. Creativity is not just getting an insight, creativity is giving form to the insight. As Rabindranath Tagore made it very clear in one of his poems, that creativity is the play of this idea and form. Quantum self gives you the idea, but the form has to be given by this ego character. And also the language circuits of the brain that's built into the brain, it has to use the memory that is in the brain. And without that, we cannot really be creative. Manifestation is a part and parcel of creativity. And this aspect must not be missed, because exploration of the archetypes, all of the archetypes except the self, is to play in the world, to create new meanings. Creativity is the basis of our life. The importance of it is time and time again emphasized in the Bhagavad Gita. Remember, in the 6th chapter, we have the explicit statement, which at first sight you do not understand. Krishna is trying to explain to Arjuna what is action and what is non-action. And he says, action that follows from other actions is akarma, Sanskrit for non-action. Or it could even be translated as action that brings evil, or karma is bad action. Think about it, what is he talking about? Action following from action? Of course action follows from action. But what he's talking about, yes, action can follow from conditioned action, machine action, mechanical action, like irrational thinking. It's logical, algorithmic, continuous, dependent on your memory. That's what we bring a complete rational thinking, creating a wave of thinking that is, once it builds on the basis which is wrong, then we'll continue to build this wrong thing, like the idea of scientific materialism. It's a huge complex system, but everything in it is wrong because the basis is wrong. Basis is incomplete. Matter cannot be the ground of being because it cannot even manifest itself, nobody to experience. How could that be? And that happens because we are depending on rational thinking. How do we get out of this? We get out of this. This is what the Bhagavad Gita is saying. We get out of this by realizing that real karma, real action, that we want in our life that matters must follow from non-action. Very confusing initially. Action following from action is non-action, whereas action that follows from non-action is real action. Akarmani karma. Karma that arises from akarma, non-action, is the right action. What is he talking about? He is talking about action that follows from the unconscious. Now there is no action. Okay? He is distinguishing between creative action and conditioned action. Conditioned action follows from other conditioned action, and that really doesn't count. It's the repetition of the same thing that you have done before. Mechanical action, machines can do, mechanical part of it, which is determined, repeats over and over. The world cannot progress that way. There is no movement of consciousness that way. Consciousness does not expand in the right way in that way. There is no expansion, it contracts. If we want expansion of consciousness, if we want transformation, new meaning, new purpose in life, we cannot do it on the basis of what is already conditioned. We have to have creativity, and that follows from unconscious, the unmanifest, the potentiality that has not been manifested. That is what we have to go for. That is what the job of creative action is. Creativity is to bring the unmanifest into manifest. But to bring the unmanifest into manifest, we have to give form to idea, and that requires the old. So the old has a role to play, the new has a role to play, and creativity is the dynamic interaction between the two. We need both, ego and the quantum soul. So it is that in one of the Upanishads there is this beautiful description of two birds. One bird sits on a high branch and another bird sits on a low branch. The low branch bird does all kinds of things and enjoys, experiences the world for better or for worse. High bird looks upon whole thing indifferent. That's the picture. And that is one of the visions of the Upanishad. If we become interested in the unity, realize the unity, that then we identify with that high bird, the quantum self. We develop that quality of indifference, non-attachment to the world. So when this ego, which is attached to the world, attached to the enjoyment of the world, looks higher up, then it will go towards experiencing the real self. That's the idea. Unfortunately, if we did that, that would be a trap. So this is the part of the Upanishad which has made sense to a lot of people, and they get into this self-exploration. The tradition glamorizes this image, but is that the only image of the Upanishad? No, there is also Isha Upanishad, which gives a different image, which says description of Ishvara, God, not in the sense of a personalized God, but God as the creative impetus of unity consciousness. That God which precipitates downward causation. Think of God as the Lord of downward causation. That would be a more appropriate image for you to have. Or that God which eventually becomes the quantum self, God within. And what is the right way of thinking of this God? The right way to think about it is that the Upanishad says that think of it in terms of what it has done. What has it done? It has created new things all along. Otherwise, consciousness would not be able to evolve. This whole idea of evolution tells us one thing and one thing only. The whole idea of progressivity of biological evolution, that evolution progresses from simple to complex, that tells us one thing very clearly. It's a purposive movement of consciousness. What is the purpose? To create better and better representations of the archetypes. First, the feelings in terms of more and more sophisticated feelings, and then more and more sophisticated meanings. And we should not get stuck. We should go on in our advancement of that sophistication. If we look at this as the epitome of life, then we understand why Isha Upanishad is saying Ishvara is Kavi, poet, Monishi. It develops the higher intellect. Monishi is the soul level of intelligence, creative intelligence. Kavi is poet. These are creative terms to describe the human being. Hardly a description of the quantum self that is indifferent or developing indifference. High indifference may it be, it may not be the low indifference that ordinary indifference people identify with. It may be an indifference that allows for compassion. Indeed, we find that these great liberated people were also great compassionate people. They were not without love, agreed. I'm not saying that. But still, these non-attached personalities don't engage in creative evolution of our processing capacity, of our cognitive capacity. And we need that. Not only we need that, that is the purpose of evolution. That is the purpose of manifestation of consciousness itself. So in a sense, we find that although the Upanishads are great in terms of producing the impetus for eventual understanding of the world, the three Mahabhaikyas, the Panchakosha Prakriya, all these are excellent ideas. The idea of Karana Sharira, Sthula Sharira, Shukma Sharira, these are excellent ideas. That there is a causal body, a subtle body, and this gross body in which representations are made. In modern terms, the causal body creates software in the hardware. Sthula Sharira is the hardware, the Shukma Sharira is for making software in the hardware. That's what we picture it in the computer age. It's a beautiful, simple understanding of how reality works. We can never understand software with hardware laws of hard science. Hard science, even quantum physics, gives us only how the hardware works. Quantum science of matter does not tell us more than anything about hints about how the hardware works. We have to develop the quantum science of the software making capacity. That's where the quantum science of the new subtle experiences, that's where the crux is. And this idea has to be developed, right? And this is what I did. I said that the meaning processing capacity is a quantum capacity. The science of meaning is a quantum science. Science of vital energy is a quantum science. Vital energy is a quantum energy. And this is what gave us the additional power of quantum science. It took us beyond quantum physics. How do I apply the new quantum ideas in human affairs? We got to have this recognition that we use the quantum science of meaning and vital energy processing that we call feeling. Using that quantum science, you have to transform ourselves creatively in creative exploration of feeling and meaning, and eventually the exploration of the archetype themselves to make better and better software for the operation of the human affairs. This gives biology a scientific approach. This gives medicine a scientific approach with both theory and practice. It gives social sciences a true scientific approach with both theory and practice. Before quantum science came along, these things were just empirical sciences, all based on evidence with no theoretical basis, not even theoretical basis for thinking what constitutes healing, what constitutes a society. We had no understanding of it except the empirical data that we collected piecemeal with. Has not worked very well, has it? Created all this chaos that we find in our society and social system. With the quantum science, we'll do things better. This is the idea. But we have to learn to combine creativity and conditioning. This balancing aspect, to recognize it and learn it, is crucial. And this is the objective. That Upanishadic picture is not useful. The Isha Upanishadic picture of looking at the purpose of creation as creating new poetry, creating new ways of intelligence, that is the right picture. This is the picture that the work of Sri Aurobindo took to heart, and this is the picture which was started by the Bhagavad Gita and followed through by Patanjali, which is the book about the creative process. Except it's very much misunderstood. Nobody interprets Yoga Sutra that way anymore. So this is the part that I will talk about in the future expositions. Creativity and condition, they have to work together. You have to understand the creative process. You have to understand how we explore new meaning with creativity. Then you have to understand how we explore feelings. There is the science of that too. That is also part of Indian tradition. It was begun in the Bhagavad Gita in the form of Bhakti Yoga. Yoga of devotion, that's the way it's translated, but it's more than that. Bhakti Yoga is the yoga of science of feeling. Bhakti Yoga is the yoga of science of working with vital energy. And then that grew into the very mature science of Tantra that began in India, and then finally that was transferred to Tibet, where it was developed much more. And these things also need to be talked about. So in this part, then we have finished one aspect of the talking about reality, the Upanishadic aspect. This gives us some basis. There is something else in the Upanishad, I'll bring it up a little later, which is the subject of reincarnation. That is mentioned in the Upanishad. The theory is developed in the Upanishad. But we'll talk about later when we talk about more fully about evolution. In between, we go into the Bhagavad Gita and we go into the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, develop more the ideas of creative process that is developed in the Yoga Sutra, and also the idea of integration of the yogas that is talked about in the Bhagavad Gita. Thank you. A very good question has been posed by the audience. Why we are dealt with a brain that has this negative emotional brain circuit? Why indeed? these are creating huge problems for us. Most of our negative actions come from this negative emotion. Some of them, of course, from the overindulgence of the me, but even that would not be so serious if the me was harmless. But the me, when it's combined with this negative emotional brain circuits, become harmful. In the old traditions, we used to call this when evil takes over the brain, when evil takes over the me, when you are possessed, when you make a deal with the evil, like the story that the great Goethe told us, the character Faust. He made a deal with Mephistopheles, the representation of the devil. We do that, you know. We sell our soul, so to speak. And then Mephistopheles, the evil, uses us to serve its purpose. Of course, this is just an image. This is not to be taken anything except as a metaphor. But we do that. Metaphorically, we do that. And all because we have this negative emotional brain circuit that compels us to do that. Mephistopheles forces itself on Faust. That's the reality. It's not that Faust chooses Mephistopheles. There are very few people who are connivers by their own choice. They're connivers because they're ignorant that they're choosing them. They're driven by the ignorant drive of the negative. So if the negative didn't exist in the first place, it would be very nice. So it's very important to understand how the negative became negative. It isn't negative in animals, you know. We often say that all these circuits are instinctual circuits. They came from our animal ancestry. Indeed, they have connection with the instinctual behavior of animals, but the animals don't have negative emotions. If you look at the behavior of animals, it will surprise you. A deer cub, of course, is very afraid of lions, and they will run from lions, but only when the lion is hungry. Deer cubs are found to play with lion cubs. Really? Deer cubs play with lion cubs. When the lion cub is not hungry, the deer cub knows there is nothing to fear. Why do they recognize deer cub as friendly? Because there is nothing in the lion cub that is aggressive. When the lion is hungry, it's just their instinct to attack the deer cub and eat it. But only when they are hungry. And then the deer cub knows that now I need to run. So the fear that is built into the deer cub that enables it to run before it's attacked, that fear is the built-in fear, because the built-in fear is much more efficient than if the fear would be invited as a conscious something to be invoked when attacked. Too late. So in the animals, these instincts develop to give automatic action. And indeed, as that, it's completely okay. They're just feelings that saves us. In humans, this is built in also as the flight or fight response is built in. That's good. The part of the brain that controls it, amygdala, that part is corrupted further. That's the problem. That part invokes not only the feeling but also emotion, which is how the feeling is interpreted. And that's where the hell breaks loose. Mind brings the hell. The interpretation that mind puts is much more broader than the original intention of just the flight-fight response when you see a real danger. That's when you need the automatic action. But you see your boss and you make boss metaphorically into a tiger. But is the boss really a tiger? Is there any physical danger? No. But you think that it is a danger to you, your survival, because the boss means criticism, boss means extra work, boss means. These are all your interpretations. And that interpretation has generated a behavior which was perfectly innocent for the animals, but for you is loaded with negativity. And it's artificial. You have superimposed your interpretation on the instinctual behavior and made it into a negative emotion. Now, why is that part universal? That part too tends to be quite universal. We really have even the circuits of feeling in the human animal is not just the response of the feeling. It produces some emotional behavior, a mental behavior. The mental behavior comes from the collective unconscious. Our ancestors split the archetype of good into good and evil. And therefore, we have made certain ways of thinking this in this dualistic way. This is good, this is evil. And therefore, we have built into some universal meanings in perfectly harmless feeling circuits, and those universal meanings are loaded with mental negativity. That's how we get envy, that's how we get jealousy, that's how we get competitiveness, that's how we get domination. All these things have a mental component, meaning component. That came from the processing of meaning. Now, you might say, well, but animals have that too. Yes, some of the higher animals do have this mental component. And the reason is that for animals, the mind, although it's at a level of intuition, but they do use the mind to generalize their processing ability, cognitive ability, and this aspect has that component of some mental processing. And therefore, yes, animals do have that domination characteristic. Some animals, like lions, we do see that. But human beings have elevated to such an extent that the negativity in humans is incomparable. No animals use these circuits in the negative way that human beings have learned to use them. No animals have murdered so many of their fellow creatures. They really don't. So all this makes the situation very complicated. The circuits, instinctual circuits of animals being transformed into negative emotion is really an extra burden that we carry. The other extra burden arises from the pleasure circuits, and they're connected to addiction. These are also things that human beings have. We have this extra baggage. And we cannot shed this very easily. We really have to retrain, rewire the brain by building positive circuits, by building better ways to process the rational part of the brain. This rewiring the brain is a major advancement in brain science, because the previous belief was that the brain cannot be changed, and now at least new discoveries suggest clearly that the brain can be changed. This is called neuroplasticity, and this is very good. So we can be creative, we can build positivity, we can indeed explore our potentialities, manifest them as insights by the use of creative process, and then manifest them as brain circuits, manifest them as character, manifest them in our behavior, and that way we can undergo transformation. Major thing, major change.
Mhm.
Thank you. Another question has been raised from the audience. How about victimhood? Many people have automatically a defensive shield they have built around them, which is playing the victim, a new persona, victim persona, as if the victim persona will save you some of the work that one has to do about transformation, about creativity. But you won't, because you can't. You are a victim of injustice, you are a victim of ignorance, you are a victim of poverty, you are a victim of child abuse, you are a victim that lets you escape from doing, from many actions. And there also the spiritual traditions are very clear. Now we have to remember that shloka, that verse from the Bhagavad Gita that I talked about before. Action that follows from action, that is really non-action. It will lead only to a karma. That will only keep you in the same condition over and over and repetition of behavior. Is that what you want? You want to go on suffering the way you do? Yes, you have been a victim in the past. Are you a victim now? Now you are a victim of you, yourself, for using that part of your persona. What was before is not now. Now, of course, it is easy to say. It's not really easy to recover some of this trauma that made you into a victim. I'm not suggesting that. But the first step is for you to recognize that I don't have to be a victim now. Can I get rid of the automatic action that follows from some of this past traumatic memory that I have? That's the real question. Can I heal myself? That's the real question. Victimhood will never lead you to creativity or healing or even therapy. You can always play the victim and stay in your misery. This is what the Bhagavad Gita is saying. Action that follows from conditioning, that follows from memory, that follows from unconsciousness, that follows from built-in circuits in the brain, that will just lead to the repetition of the same behavior that you are suffering from. You don't need to defend that behavior. Help is available in the form of potentialities that you can learn to use and get rid of. The very reason for the victimhood. All those memories are tormenting you, keeping you in a prison. And you can get out of the prison by using creativity, which begins in the process of therapy. All this is part of the spiritual traditions of India. Spirituality is not only for finding the self, finding the escape from the world of suffering. World of suffering is not the only thing about the world. It can also be a world of joy. It can be a world of creativity. Spirituality can be used also for that part of the world, exploration of that part. And this is the positive part of spirituality that has developed in Indian tradition. The Bhagavad Gita does not suggest victimhood. Arjuna, as you know, beginning of the story, is incapacitated by victimhood, by a sense of anxiety that is arising because you have to kill all these relatives, he says. But it is really not only that. That is part of it, but part of it also is that he's afraid. He's fearful. Is he able to fight against all these great warriors? Is he enough? Is he adequate? These are the questions that is also dragging. Why is the victimhood used as the victimhood? Because the question is always, am I adequate? Can I fight the war of Kurukshetra? Can I win the battle? Is going on inside of us? All these negative emotions, can I really fight against them and win? So we become a victim. It's a very convenient armor to generate anxiety neurosis, and therefore I cannot act. I'm anxious. I cannot act. I cannot fight. I refuse to fight. And then Krishna has to act as the therapist. But he doesn't end there. Modern therapy in the hand of scientific materialism has become a tool only for coping with the situation. But Arjuna cannot stop in just coping. If Krishna was a therapist, then he would just keep Arjuna, okay, Arjuna, don't break down. I'll keep you wealthy, I'll give you therapy. That's what the modern therapist does. But Arjuna has to fight and win. This is what the behavioral therapist, the materialist therapist cannot. How does Arjuna win the battle? How does Arjuna become courageous to face the battle, engage in the battle? That we cannot do without this exploring potentialities, becoming courageous, really picking up the weapon and kill the enemy. That requires creativity. That requires real creative action. And this is the job of transformation that enables us. It's an enabler.